If you armed a jackass with a PhD, you would almost undoubtedly produce an economist. They're idiots. They don't know what they're doing. They're using the wrong variables even. Economics looks a lot like fluid mechanics did about the year 1720. A complete mess, people arguing over nothing, and no one really knowing what they're talking about. The principal problem is that they're using money as the variable. Money is not the variable in the economy. The chief variable in the economy is actually choice. What is choice? Well, it's choice if you choose it. More correctly, it's choice if somebody chooses it. Choice is an option. Ultimately, it comes down to a question of time times a quality factor. Because time is what limits people's lives, and therefore time is what also limits the economy. The variable is not money, but it's actually time in the form of choice. Attending a church service, attending a political rally, going to a classical music concert, or going to a rock concert can all represent equal amounts of choice. In fact, somebody might prefer one to the other. The fact is, it all comes down to time. There was an economist who got a Nobel Prize talking about the total transactional cost, that people included the amount of time they have to spend with the money. He didn't go far enough. He still was including the money. The money is also a factor of time. People trade time in the form of work in order to have money to have choice. But it's the time that matters. In fact, they've come up with recent surveys showing that people are not happier once they've earned more than $75,000 a year. And the reason is you run out of time. Below $75,000 a year, but they don't have the money, but they do have time. Above $75,000 a year, they finally have enough money that they can always do something fun. Above that, they don't get any more time. Since they don't get any more time, they're not any happier. It's very hard to be happy if you don't have something better to do. And in fact, trying to increase choice at that point means trying to increase the quality of their time. They have to spend lots of money to have small improvements. There is a curve of choice. At low amounts of money, very quickly, people's level of choice increases with income. At higher amounts of money, it is virtually impossible to increase your level of choice. This is why large executive bonuses are stupid. They don't work because they can't work. The amount of money it would take to require choice is virtually unattainable. At $50,000 a year, a person receiving an additional $50 would have a choice. That could be going out to dinner. At $500,000 a year, $50 is a joke. At $500,000 a year, to increase your choice, you would probably need at least an additional $50,000. At $5 million a year of income, you would probably need to have an additional $5 million to see a significant increase in your choice. Large executive bonuses don't accomplish anything because they can't. There is a table of after-tax giving that I found at a place called Empty Tomb Inc. It is from the U.S. Department of Commerce from 2005, and what it shows is that people at the lowest income brackets have the highest amount of after-tax charitable giving. The reason is because charitable giving is a function of your ability to change your level of choice. If you have a higher rate of change in choice, you will be more generous. As people's income increases, their ability to change their choice decreases and their charitable giving decreases. This also represents some of the difference between the United States and Europe. In Europe, it has historically been more difficult to change jobs, increase your income, and there is a higher rate of taxes after income. All of this means if you have additional income, it is very hard to increase the amount of money, and because of the taxes, your total choice increases less slowly. That's one of the factors for why Europeans are less generous than Americans in making charitable contributions. If you take the after-tax table and you assume that the level above $70,000 a year is a baseline level of 1.5. The curve is constructed by subtracting the minimum value of 1.5% from each of the lower values, then assuming that they're constant over the range. There's no values available for below $5,000, so the value from $5,000 to $10,000 is extended to zero. By assuming that the charitable giving is directly proportional to the rate of change of choice, which is probably not completely correct, the function can be corrected by a normalization at $70,000, assuming 70,000 George of choice for $70,000 as a normalization, just to make it easier to follow. You then produce the above table. Now this isn't completely correct because above $70,000 a year, this is 2005, it is not completely flat, but it's at a low level. It's no more than 1 in 5. At the lowest levels, you are increasing choice at something on the order of 2 units of choice for each dollar. I would suggest the unit of choice could most correctly be called the George, since George Washington is on the dollar bill. So you get 2 George of choice for each dollar. At $70,000 a year, It would take $5 to buy $1 worth of choice. It becomes very inefficient in increasing choice and increasing economic activity. Economists have what they think is a paradox, which is that if the government taxes $1,000 or the government cuts services by $1,000, which will produce the greater economic hurt? The idiot theory that economists have is that the taxes will actually be less damaging because you can replace some of the tax money with additional savings, but the government services can't be replaced. That's complete idiocy. If you use choice, you get the right answer. If the government takes $1,000 away from you, whatever amount of choice that represents, you've lost it. If the government takes $1,000 of government services away from you, most people do not lose the $1,000. For instance, if they close half the parks, the other half are still open. They're more crowded, they're less convenient, but you haven't lost all of the choice. It is because choice determines economic activity and the amount of money flow. Money flow is not a function of money. Money flow is a function of choice. Economists don't know what they're doing. Above $120,000 a year, charitable giving rises again. The reason for this is people have increased choice in the sense that they think they've met all their commitments. There is a lag. At 70, in this charge, about $70,000 a year, $75,000 currently. This was 2005 after all. People actually don't see much of an increase in choice, but people feel like they need a cushion, and so they don't feel that they have enough money until $120,000 a year. At that point, they feel like they can be generous because they've met all their commitments, and so they feel that they have essentially some extra money. Again, it is the choice that determines the economic activity. Choice is interdependent. If Bob and Mike both want to go fishing, if Bob loses his job, Mike can't go fishing either. Fishing alone isn't any fun. One person's choice determines other people's choices. It's interconnected. When you disrupt choice, the entire system of choice falls apart and the entire economy slows down. This is why it is so hard to recover from recessions and why governments should spend to fill in most of the money in a recession. Because once the network of choice has been lost, it is very hard to reestablish and it takes a long time to do it. One of the biggest problems in choice is housing. If you transfer money from people who have a low rate of increase in choice to people in a higher rate of increase of choice, such as below $70,000 a year, the first thing that's going to happen is housing prices are going to increase as more money becomes available. And that will mean no increase in choice. Spending $5,000 a month for an apartment does not give you more choice than renting that same apartment for $4,000 a month. Again, it is time times a quality factor. You're going to spend the same amount of time, you're going to have the same quality. The additional money is a drain. In arguing over the point of taxation, the maximum taxation point should actually be at $75,000 per year. Everybody earning over $75,000 a year should be taxed at a maximum sustainable rate because the amount of increase in choice is limited. If you want to increase taxes above $75,000 a year to minimize taxes below $75,000 a year, because that will maximize total choice in the economy. The problem with doing that is if you tax everyone above $75,000 a year, that represents about 25% of the total income available, which is about 20%. 80% of the U.S. economy is supposedly income, so that means 20% could be taxed. Even if you tax at 100%, that's not enough to meet government expenses. And therefore, you're going to have to have other sources of income for the government. Even if the government, again, taxes the non-income part of the economy, you can't tax that at 100% either. Consequently, you have to tax the efficient part of the economy, the people below $75,000 a year. You have to realize that when you do that, you are reducing choice. Ultimately, when so-called conservative economists want to talk about taxes, they're idiots. Because actually, economically, there's no such thing as a tax. There's choice. When government removes money from you, in the first case, immediately, you lose choice. However, if the government builds interstate highways, your choice increases. Similar things with things like public schools and national parks, all of which actually increase people's choice. It is money well spent. But again, it's always the choice. Just looking at taxes and taking money makes no sense. You have to consider what the government spends it on, and does that spending increase people's net choice? Things like security functions, whether it's police, security guards, or the military, don't increase choice. They prevent damage to the existing choice. That needs to be understood as well. If you overspend on them, again, you hurt choice and you hurt the economy. Government borrowing actually reduces choice because of the interest costs. So if the government's going to spend $10 billion to finance debt, they only get $9 billion, which is actually producing choice. The rest is a loss. Similarly, inflation also hurts choice because people cannot plan, they cannot make decisions for the future. That is part of choice. People save money in order to have choice. This is why economists saying, well, if the government raises taxes, people will take money out of their savings to compensate. Again, that is a reduction in choice. The savings are there to give choice, to give people a future decision which they value. Inflation undercuts that. So both government inflation and government borrowing are both bad for choice. Republican voting patterns can be assumed from the curve of choice. Above $120,000 a year, people finally feel like they have enough money. One would predict less Republican voter. But between a curve of about $60,000 to $120,000, it is very hard for people to increase their level of choice. So any removal of money from taxation would produce the highest level of resentment. One would therefore predict the highest rates of Republican voting would be for people between $60,000 and $120,000 per year. The Chinese government is eventually going to have a reduction in growth for the simple reason that they are reducing choice. Freedom of speech and buying a new car both represent choice. There's no difference between them. By trying to do everything in terms of money and economics, they've gotten it wrong. And the constant reduction of people's choice through reductions in freedom will limit the total growth available for the Chinese economy.